Hi witchlings, welcome back to my channel. It is me, your local chaotic witch aunt. And today, we are talking about the difference between Stregheria, Stregoneria, and Benedicaria. This all falls under the sect of Italian folk magic, and I will warn you, this is a very academic video. I have my sources, I have my outline, I have everything. I'll be pulling from practitioners and their opinions, as well as opinions of trained folklorists and anthropologists. We love to see it. So before we get started, we got a few notes on Italian folk magic as a whole. Biggest question I get, is it open? Is it closed? I made a TikTok video on this a couple weeks back, but it's just not that simple to say. And it is kind of an ongoing conversation and discussion within the Italian folk magic and Italian American folk magic community. A lot of people say no, even though it's not initiatory. It is passed down typically through families and generations. And a lot of people say yes, and then a but. And I am a yes but person. Yes, it is open. You are free to learn about it. You are, free to do some of the cures from it. But my question for you is, if you are not Italian, why do you want to? Is it because you have an interest in folk magic? And if so, then I really encourage you to look into your own ancestry and heritage, because I assure you at some point that exists, especially if your family immigrated. As well as that, if you're interested in Italian folk magic or doing the cures because you just want to be able to fix something quick, I'm not gonna, you can, I'm not gonna say, it's probably not gonna work. Italian folk magic, like most folk magics, is very tied to the people it came from. So ancestral connection, the land or the homeland it came from, the reason it came about, the cultural need for it, and from there, it's tied to people. It is folk magic, magic of the people. When we look at Italian folk magic, it is connected to people from Italy. That doesn't mean that those who haven't immigrated and assimilated can't reconnect and reconstruct if they have Italian heritage, but that is a process that takes a very long time. And if you're interested in it, I am gonna send you the long route, which is the learning about it, doing the research, seeking out community, seeking out mentors. If you are of the ancestor veneration, researching, it's not just, I want to learn folk magic, so I'm going to do it. It's you need to understand the culture that it comes from, why it exists, what it was used for, the beliefs around it, and everything in between. There is a smudge on my glasses. It's not much better. Very oftentimes, Italian folk magic, like I mentioned, is passed through families. If your grandma does it, she'll pass it to your mother, and then mother to daughter or son. It's also region specific. So if you're looking at Sicilian folk magic, it's going to be very different from northern folk magic. And even then, within southern Italy, different regions have different alterations, different prayers, different reasonings, different beliefs. There is a section in an area in Italy that uses owl statues to guard against witches, because it was believed that witches turn into owls. So owls are bad luck. And then there are two different types of owls, one of which is the owl of Athena, and the other one is the not fun owl. I'm of course talking about this with resources in my description. I am coming prepared, citations, etc. There are multiple books written on Italian folk magic and written about it. It's not closed to learn. You can learn anything that you want to. But like many folk magics, there is a question of, if you are not from this ancestry, if you don't have ties to Italy, why are you looking into it? Instead of looking into Germanic folk magic or German folk magic. Germanic and German are two different things. But German folk magic, Slavic folk magic, England has its own sects of folk magic, Ireland has its own folk magic, the Appalachians have its own folk magic. All of these different regions have their own folk magic, and while folk magic has similarities throughout many different cultures and regions, especially those historically intermingled, example, Greece and Italy, similar folk practices and beliefs, Not exactly the same, but same cures. Some in Mexico as well, and some in Portugal, which was influenced by Italy and Greece. All of this, we have a lot of similar things throughout folk magic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same to the point that you could walk into Slavic folk magic as an Italian folk practitioner and just start picking things up, because it may be difficult to, it's just maybe two different belief sets, two different reasonings. Those are my general notes. We're getting into the hot topics. All right, Stregheria, Stregoneria, and Benedicaria. What is the fucking difference? What is the difference? We're gonna start with Stregheria. All right, so what is Stregheria? This is a quote from Mallory Valdez. She runs the blog Italian Folk Magic. She wrote the book Honoring Your Ancestors. Stregheria is a term used almost exclusively by American Anglophones talking about a witchcraft tradition which allegedly emerges from Italy. Often it is accompanied by Murray-esque claims of an unbroken pagan priesthood operating in secret until today. Much of the work presented as Stregheria appears to have originated with the writings of Raven Grimassi, which must be read with a critical eye. Grimassi is a controversial figure amongst Italian practitioners, to say the least. Now we're gonna say, why is he controversial? What? Frankie, what are you talking about? Are you saying Stregheria has nothing to do with Italian folk magic? More from Mallory Valdez. Stregheria is not a common word in Italy. The Italian word for witchcraft is Stregoneria, and it has profoundly negative connotations, although some modern practitioners have followed the example of their Anglophone counterparts and began reappropriating the term. We do see Stregheria in some texts from the 18th and 19th centuries. Quick note. But I have no idea if you don't know this text, then I don't know either. And so that's just kind of a basic understanding of when you go to Italy, look at Italian folk magic, Stregheria is not the term that you would use to describe a witch. And if it is, it's not because it's a good thing. It's like, oh, that's Stregoneria, like she's a witch, like fattura, not good. Then we have Fukiari on the other side, which are the fixers, the magi, the healers. This comes from this particular next section. All of these quotes come from Spells, Saints, and Streghe, Witchcraft, Folk Magic, and Healing in Italy by Sabina Magliocco, who is trained in folklore and anthropology and spent a lot of time in Sardinia studying folk traditions. So she looks at it from a very cultural point of view, and I appreciate that, especially because I think with how ingrained folk magic is into culture and folk beliefs and folklore, understanding that and approaching things from a socio-economic political standpoint or an anthropology or sociology standpoint has huge merits. So this is part one. So this entire thing is 13 parts. I really recommend you read all of it because it has very good information, resources at the end so you can do further reading, etc. And I love Sabina Magliocco. She also wrote several books academic-wise. She has a chapter that I found called Preliminary Observations on the History of a Reclaimed Tradition, re Stregheria. I don't know which book it's from, try and figure it out. So Magliocco writes, Grimassi, Martello, and Bruno have been visible Italian-American witches who have reworked elements of ethnic folk magic into vibrant new traditions. That's important to note. Reworking things into new traditions. So when we look at Stregheria and we look at where the material and the information comes from, it does have some historical and ethnographic accuracy, but it's not given as information on what people did historically or in specific areas or the folklore. It is given as information that this is a surviving tradition that has lasted for thousands of years and needs to be rediscovered. And then we go on to Leland. So at the center of all of Stregheria, you will see a couple characters. You will see Martello and Bruno, but mostly you will see Leland, who wrote the Gospel of Aradia, and Grimassi, who wrote a lot of books, The Holy Ways of the Strega, What We Knew in the Night, Italian Witchcraft. So Leland's material for emerging Italian-American traditions does not bear strong resemblance to Italian folk magic within ethnographic record. So just for reference, Magliocco's thing has article has witchcraft as folk healing. magic and counter magic, amulets and protective devices, il malocchio, or the evil eye, the folkloric witch, context of traditional Italian folk practice, influence of the Catholic Church, the survivalist bias, problems with the concept of an organized Italian religion, Stregheria, Italian folk magic, and introduction. Yet neither Leland's material nor emerging Italian American witchcraft traditions bear a strong resemblance to Italian folk magical practice as documented in its ethnographic record of the last 100 years. So that's bad. When we're looking at witchcraft and folk magic, if you say this is authentic, this is Italian witchcraft, and then you cross it back to other ethnographic studies of 100 years, and there's no resemblance, that is an issue. Furthermore, Magliocco talks about the ways in which Stregheria and Italian folk magic practice differ. 1. Italian folk magic is not an organized or unified religion, but a varied set of beliefs and practices. 2. While it has deep historical roots, it is not a survival of an ancient religion, but an integral part of a rural peasant economy and way of life, highly syncretized with folk Catholicism. 3. Knowledge of magical practices was at one time diffused throughout the rural population, rather than limited to a secret group of magical practitioners. The last part is important because we do see in the Aradia that the Aradia was a group of people, and it had one witch who gave this manuscript to Leland. And the idea is that it's like a continued pagan tradition of an ancient Etruscan religion, which there are other things. And we're gonna get more into this, okay? This is why it's an issue, and so Stregheria itself isn't an issue. It is not an invalid practice. If you wanna practice Stregheria, go for it. But it is not the same as Italian folk magic. Continuing on. Magliocco writes, his works, The Ways of the Strega and Hereditary Witchcraft, lay out in detail a system of beliefs, rituals, and practices which he claims are practiced by North American witches of Italian descent, but which harken back to the old religion, which survived relatively intact throughout Italy. No, it didn't. He accepts at face value Leland's story of Aradia as Diana's daughter and messenger on earth, seeing her as a 14th century revivalist of La Vecchia Religione, the old religion. Not content to simply pass on some Italian American spells and folk practices, his intent is to restore the original tradition which Aradia had returned to the people. That is to recreate the ancient religion of the Etruscan and pre-Etruscan Italic peoples. Okay. Cool. He wants to recreate an ancient religion of Etruscan and pre-Etruscan Italic peoples. Very cool. That is not the same as what most of Italy does. And that's the kind of disconnect is there. I thought this myself when I was starting my practice is I looked at Italian witchcraft by Raven Grimassi and was like, this is what my ancestors did. This is what my great-grandma did. No, what my great-grandma and my grandma practice was more along the lines of Benedicaria, which is Benedicaria and Stregoneria, Italian folk magic. And within this kind of idea of Stregheria as a unified, organized religion and an organized practice, it erases what folk magic is and what Italian witchcraft really looks like. This is from part 10. Once again, I highly, highly recommend you read all of Sabina Magliocco's big 13-part paper. It's amazing. At one time, many villages had a number of folk healers who could cure a variety of illnesses. They ranged from those who cured in herbs, magic formulas, and prayers, professional sorcerers who were called in serious cases of magic attack. In practice, however, these practitioners overlapped, since almost any illness could be judged to the result of a magical working. Folk healers seldom referred to themselves as Streghe, although their neighbors might call them such. But as Fukiari, fixers, magai, masculine, plural, singular, mago, magay, feminine, plural, singular, mago, magic workers. This latter term has nothing to do with the Latin word imago, image, but derives from the Latin magus, ultimately from the Persian magush, magic worker, mage. In Sardinia, they are simply known as practicos, knowledgeable ones, akin to the English cunning folk. Most inherit their craft from a relative, although occasionally a healer will acquire power directly from a saint. She also goes on to give that information of like when that happened. So that's a kind of brief on Stregheria. All right, and so Stregheria, when I look up the term, it's a book by Charles Godfrey Leland, and most of the titles that you see are by Gramassi, Charles Godfrey Leland. The two at the front, Italian Magic, Secret Lives of Women, and Italian Folk Magic, are not about Stregheria, they're about Italian folk magic. But they're getting lumped over this term, which in reality is not used. It's not historically accurate, which isn't bad. Okay, and then when we go to Gramassi's website, Gramassi. So on Gramassi's website, he has Stregheria. Oh my God, it's gone. So he had a website called Stregheria.com. I don't know where it is. It's gone now. Okay, this is from learnedreligions.com. What is Stregheria? Stregheria is a branch of modern paganism that celebrates early Italian witchcraft. Its adherents say that their tradition has pre-Christian roots and refer to it as La Vecchia Religione, the old religion. There are a number of different traditions of Stregheria, each with its own history and set of guidelines. Today, there are many pagans and of Italian descent who follow Stregheria. The website, Stregheria.com, am I in it? It's gone. Which bills itself as the home of Stregheria on the web, says Catholicism served as a veneer that was fitted over the old religion in order to survive the period of violent persecution at the hands of the Inquisition and secular authorities. To many modern Italian witches, most Catholic saints are simply ancient pagan gods dressed in Christian garb. That's not 100% incorrect, but it's also not 100% correct. There are plenty of people who look at saints as not just ancient pagan gods. Do we see some syncretism with ancient goddesses and Madonnas or Saint Mary, especially like Diana, Juno, etc.? Yeah. Is every single saint like that? No. There are lots of saints that have like no connection to ancient pagan gods. As well as this, that it is a little inherently problematic because it completely writes off syncretism and the validity of the fact that folk Catholicism is now a very big part of folk magic in Italy, as long in other areas, and it's not necessarily bad to practice it that way. Anyways, moving on to Stregoneria. What the hell is Stregoneria? We learned about Stregheria. What's Stregoneria? So Taumaturgo in The Things We Do discusses Benedicaria versus Stregoneria in this book on page 169, 170 more. This is a book on Benedicaria. I love it though. It's very helpful, got a lot of good spells, got a lot of interesting stuff. So 169, in modern Italian, Stregoneria is the word commonly used for witchcraft. In practice, Stregoneria is composed of a variety of folk charms, spells, incantations, superstitions, and other quote-unquote low magical procedures. In many ways, it can be considered the opposite of Benedicaria, and into this category can be classified works of divination, love spells, the use of body fluids, curses, death spells, fatura, and all other things contrary to the will of God and the law of the church. So Taumaturgo separates Benedicaria and Stregoneria with one follows the will of God and the law of the church and one goes outside of it. Continuing. On the main page of his website, Gramassi refers to Stregoneria as a Catholic-rooted folk magic tradition having little, if anything, to do with authentic forms of Italian witchcraft. That is my problem. That's my problem. And cautions the reader to beware of it. At first, this statement would certainly offend some people, but if we pause and bear in mind that authentic forms of Italian witchcraft, by Italian, Gramassi is referring exclusively to his own system of Stregheria, then his statement is absolutely correct, though not for the reasons he gives elsewhere on his website. I honestly think Taumaturgo is hilarious. I love him. The difference is especially manifest in the fact that while Stregarians are proudly a part of the neo-pagan movement and have embraced that movement's pseudo-history, Stregonerians generally don't claim any pseudo-history at all, or any history beyond "this is what my mother taught me." And many consider themselves devout Catholics for the simple facts that A, they were raised as Catholics, and B, the magical system is dependent on Catholic sacramentology. However, its intentions are not in accord with the Catholic faith, and therefore any use of Catholic sacramentals is an act of sacrilege. I disagree with that because I am not a Catholic. Examples of Stregoneria are in here. Few examples are already in here, including blessed palm leaves to protect against storms, more examples: to find a relative's grave, to make a man or woman desire to you, to make a lover return. So the differences that Taumaturgo pulls from is that Stregheria is a religious system with no relationship to and no overlap with Benedicaria, a fact upon which all sides agree. Stregonerian teaching and practice is very much interwoven within the tapestry of the Benedict's teaching and practice. And I'll get back to Benedicaria and what we are talking about later. And as well as this, in anthropology journals such as Power and Magic in Italy by Thomas Hostin, there are examples documented of Fukiari or fixers practicing what would be Stregoneria, or witchcraft, the bad magic. Talking about examples, and so they're opposite of the same coin. There is some idea that Stregheria is like, actually everyone agrees that Stregheria has nothing to do with Italian folk magic. Stregoneria and Benedicaria are kind of two terms that it really depends on who you're asking if you think they're different or not. Benedicaria is a new term similar to a few others because terminology kind of, people didn't call what they were doing anything. They were like, this is just what we do, which is literally the name of this book. So the way of blessing, Benedicaria basically means like blessing. So Stregoneria, if we're getting specific, I would be considered someone who practices Stregoneria, our Italian folk magic, and Benedicaria with some Catholic influence. I would not fit fully into Benedicaria because according to Taumaturgo, you have to be a devout Catholic and actually follow Catholic rules. I honestly think that if you were raised in Catholicism and you think you're a good Catholic, but you go dance with the devil at midnight, that was a joke, or you go hex someone at the crossroads, but you still consider yourself a good Catholic, whatever. It's all about those picky things that, like, I kind of see it all like, this is, why does this matter? Whereas someone who is fully entrenched in Benedicaria is like, this matters. And that's okay. We can have differing opinions on it. More specific on Benedicaria, some modern Italian-American practitioners use the term Benedicaria, neologism, which emphasizes the role of blessing and Catholic sacramentals in the work. Practitioners of Benedicaria may or may not identify with the social role of the witch. The line between Stregoneria and Benedicaria remains blurry at best. My experience with practitioners who use the term Benedicaria is that they tend to pay closer attention to historical folk practices, which is laudable. That is written by Mallory Bedways. So that is their experience, that Benedicaria or Benedette pay more attention to historical folk practices than those who use the term Stregoneria, and that's okay. And then Taumaturgo writes of Benedicaria on page 12. Speculative history. All right. What we can know with certainty about its history is that in its origins, the practices of Benedicaria were thoroughly pagan and were most likely ties to the domestic cult, i.e. the practices of family and household rituals among the tribes of southern Italy. Of note would be the Samnites, the Brundisi, the Calabri, and others whose names have passed into history. Whatever these original rites may have been, they would have been rites of home and hearth, centered on the individual's relationship with the gods or the family's spiritual well-being. Perhaps the best modern parallel we could draw would be the praying of the rosary in an individual or family setting, or the practice of getting together and reading a passage from the Bible. Whatever these original rites were, we could safely speculate that they were influenced by other forms of paganism. At first, there may have been minor influence on some of these tribes when the Etruscan culture expanded into a small part of southern Italy around 800 BC, and again with the immigration of Greeks some 200 years later. After this, of course, was the contact and conquest which occurred in the wake of the Roman expansion, and again there may have been more influences when Hannibal overran Sicily and the Punic Wars in the latter half of that same century. All of this is speculation with no proof, we admit, but it is well known that when people come into contact with one another, there's always some sort of mutual influence exerted through trade, intermarriage, conquest, or colonization, slavery, or rape. And when it comes to these kind of influences, history has shown us that lower classes are always the most susceptible. Whatever speculation may be made regarding the pagan roots of Benedicaria, one thing we know for certain is that it changed drastically with the advent of Christianity. When Jesus Christ founded the Catholic Church, okay, please, I'm going past this. The Catholic faith was spread very far, very wide, and very fast, finding its strongest constituency among lower classes in every city and province of the empire. All right, we ran out of time. The important thing is, people worshipped multiple deities, including possibly Roman next to Jesus. All right, during that time, those are my dogs. My favorite line. Contrary to popular belief, Christianity was not under constant persecution. Christians were not constantly being thrown to the lions at the hands of bloodthirsty pagans. Sorry to burst your bubble. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything in here. Just talking about Christianization, legislation. It means that as we follow the patterns of religious development throughout the history of the Roman Empire in general and Italy in particular, we can see that in the first place, the suppression of paganism was not, I don't even know what this is about, either converted to Christianity wholeheartedly while incorporating some of their previous spiritual worship practices, may have practiced paganism side by side, and others outwardly converted to Christianity but practiced their paganism in secret. So syncretism happened in many different forms. That's the important part. Benedicaria, by Taumaturgo's definition, is the way of blessing and works within a heavily Catholic framework to do magic, so far to the point that certain things you shouldn't do because it's sacrilege. Benedicaria is kind of a new term, but the way of it is old. This is kind of just something that has always existed, especially since syncretism with Christianity. There was an entire article I found on Southern Italian folk magic, on Ways of the Wild and Heart, which is a blog. And so that lists the practice as novenas, incense, charms and amulets, hand mudras, like hand symbols, to ward off the evil eye, malocchio, and healing tools and rituals. Conversations on syncretism, etc., continue to be ongoing amongst academics, but many consider the old folk magic and medicine to be syncretized with the Roman Catholic tradition, thus creating, to an effect, Italian folk magic, if we're being specific, Benedicaria. So a lot of times, if someone is a practitioner of Benedicaria, they may be a whole Catholic. That's okay. Go you. I probably fit more under the label of Stregoneria because I do things that are traditionally fixing, healing work, but I also divine. I use tarot cards. So that's by Taumaturgo's definition. Depends on the folk practitioner that you're talking to. Someone may be like Benedicaria and Stregoneria are the same. Someone would be like Benedicaria is this specific sect with these rules and ideas, very Catholic, and Stregoneria is anything outside of that. It's up to you. So to finish off this video, of course, every single resource I have mentioned in this video is in the description, so you can read it yourself, you can check my sources, you can do everything. The big question, why do I have a problem with Grimassi? Because that is a big question, and it's a question that I think people have asked, is like, please talk about your beef with Grimassi. And it's not beef. Disagree with some things that he did. Do I think that he was a huge pillar in the witchcraft community and did a lot of really cool things and created a whole new tradition that Italian Americans can resonate with and practice? Yes. Which, by the way, if you are a practitioner of Stregheria, or you are Strighe, whatever, and you follow Grimassi's kind of Italian witchcraft book, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not coming here to tell you that you are wrong or you should practice Italian folk magic. Grimassi created a reconstructionist revival of ideas from an ancient Italian religion. I do think there are some falsehoods in that, and while he took historical and ethnographic accuracies, I feel as though he was not 100% honest with everything. My issue with Grimassi is not that he created a new tradition and gave Italian American witches a way to connect. My issue is that he said it was the old ways. And a lot of the information that I was given access to was him saying that it was authentic Italian witchcraft, which I have a problem with. I have a problem with saying something that you are reconstructing is authentic. when it's not at all similar to the information we have access to in ethnographies. And it may have been for a time he touted it as that, and then moved along to saying, no, I'm reconstructing it, because you do have a lot of quotes from him that say, I'm reconstructing it. But the fact that, at least for a time, and in the way it was marketed by Grimassi, by publishers, etc., was that it was the authentic Italian witchcraft and the way everyone did things. If you're interested in the Iradian or the Iridian traditions, go for it. But a lot of times, if you're second generation, third generation, you're getting information on Italian folk witchcraft or what your ancestor, you're trying to reconnect with your ancestors and what your ancestors did, what your grandma did, what your great grandma did. You will not find that in Grimassi's books. You will not find the information that is accurate to what your grandma probably did or what your great grandma probably did. And that's my problem, is that it's not accurate to what a lot of people are seeking out. So that's my 2 cents. That's my whole video. I'm pretty sure this is like 30 minutes work. Furthermore, Leland, there was entire questions about the validity of this, like, Leland's work. Like, it's folklore, we don't actually know if it's real at all. And by historical scholarship, it gained popularity in Italian Americans during the 1960s. Okay, according to Sabina Magliocco in her essay Italian American Stregheria and Wicca, Ethnic Ambivalence in American Neo-Paganism, while the secret nature of his family magical procedure made it impossible for him to reveal all its characteristics, he described it as a remnant of Sicily's cult of Demeter and Persephone, preserved under, although that was Leo, Martel, we're trying to cut that out, that's something completely different. A lot of skepticism towards Leland's claims, especially from author and scholar Ronald Hutton, theorized that if Madalena did exist, the documents she gave Leland may have contained her own family's hereditary tradition, and that it was not necessarily a widespread practice of Italian witchcraft. Hutton also suggests that Leland had enough knowledge of local folklore that he could conceivably have made up the whole thing. So, conceivably, Leland made something up, published it, and then it influenced Grimassi and a bunch of other Italian-American practitioners to say Stregheria is the original and actual Italian witchcraft and is well practiced throughout Italy when it's not. So this isn't to say that it's bad. And Raven Grimassi in his book Ways of the Strega says Stregheria is a blend of ancient Etruscan religion blended with Italian folk magic and early rural Catholicism. This is what third generation Strega from Pittsburgh, Maria Fontaine, says. A lot of what's traditionally sold as Stregheria by neo-pagan authors is an offshoot of Wicca with Italian names and customs mixed in. Although there are some similarities, it's very different from traditional Italian folk magic. It's like the difference between eating a real Italian food in a village in Tuscany and going to your local Olive Garden restaurant for dinner. There's nothing wrong with either, they're just very different. So, Ways of the Strega, which I guess is Italian witchcraft, which is the book I have, he talks about his tradition of Stregheria, which is the Oretian tradition. We do embrace new material and teaching, but we do not discard other material. A lot of people said it was too blended with Wicca. Yeah. Because, which, like, if you want to take in some Italian, like, some of Stregheria in your practice, like, certain holidays, that's great. Like, once again, completely reiterating this, I do not have a problem if you want to practice Stregheria, or the practice from Grimassi, or center Aradia and Leland and Lucifer and Diana in your practice. I do that, to an extent. I do, however, have an issue with someone saying that something is authentic when it's not. Because that just confuses a lot of people. Once again, all my resources will be in the description. I have a whole list, so you can check my work and read it yourself. And this was a whole 40-minute video on this. Because I get this question all the time. I am more than happy to further discuss Italian folk magic as an Italian American who is reconnecting with my heritage, as well as reconstructing and reconnecting with my ancestral practice. It is a long process. It takes years. I'm not even there yet, babe. I'm like Italian American folk witch. We're not even fully there yet, all right? I just learned about Befana this past year. Then just made that connection, and that my great grandma did it. Anyways, oh, I need a stretch. my back. If y'all heard that, I hope Sally makes it loud enough for you to enjoy. Same with that one. I'm very crunchy. And that is my informational, academic, and educational video on the differences between Stregheria, Stregoneria, and Benedicaria. Thank you so much for watching. If you want, you can subscribe, like, leave a comment, turn the bell on, but no pressure. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Sa benedica.